Okay, we're going to be moving into the next section of today, and this one is called Dark Data, Bias, Trust and Inclusion. To give you a little bit of an intro as to what the next talk and panel are going to be about. From surveillance capitalism to prediction products to algorithmic bias, there are clearly ethical and political challenges in the emerging data economy. Have even our creative experiences become raw material for training machines? This session is going to explore the societal problems and unintended consequences of current implementation of AI and what we need to fix to make a better world. So for the first session of this session, as you can see, we're going to have Karen Palmer coming and speaking to us. Karen Palmer is the storyteller from the future. She's an award-winning international artist and TED speaker and creates immersive film experiences at the intersection of film, AI technology, gaming, immersive storytelling, neuroscience, consciousness, implicit bias, and my favorite, the parkour philosophy of moving through fear. Please join me in giving Karen a huge round of applause.
This is an emergency broadcast transmission. This is not a test.
I don't know how I'm going to break this to you, so I'm just going to give it to you straight. I'm going to tell you a story, and I know it's going to sound far-fetched, but I'm urging you to be open-minded. You see, your very future depends upon it. I have been sent back to deliver a very important message today by some of the very people in this audience's future self from the year 2033. You see, you may think this is just another Beyond conference. It's going to be further from the truth. This whole event has been constructed for me to deliver this important message today to 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 important AI gatekeepers of the future. If you feel that you could possibly be one of these AI influencers, I am urging you to please pay very careful attention to what I'm about to say. If, however, you're confident you're not one of these people, please feel free to check your email. Oh, sorry, I'm so rude. I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Karen Palmer, and I'm the storyteller from the future. And I've come back to enable you to survive what is to come through the power of storytelling. I kind of get the sense that not everybody in this room is taking my word for the fact that I'm from the future. Maybe because we're in Edinburgh. So I'm going to do something very dangerous. I'm going to break protocol number 7,672 billion 1x1z, and I'm going to tell you something from the future I could not possibly know unless I've come from there. And when you hear what I tell you, as fantastical as it sounds, you're going to know within your core that it's absolutely true. So what am I going to tell you? In the time where you currently live, you control every single aspect of society through technology. However, in the time where I come from, technology controls every single aspect of our society. So you see, in this current time, when it comes to something like your driverless cars, like your Ubers, your main concern and focus is safety. However, in the time where I come from, God, we were so naive. You see, the main focus is security. So if you were to call for a driverless car like an Uber, and you step into that vehicle and the AI scans you, and it deems that you have any violations against you, that Uber will be not going to go to your designated destination. That driverless vehicle will be taking you to the local police station for processing. So now that I hopefully have your attention, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my work, and then you're going to fully understand why the people in this room selected me to come back here and deliver this very important message for you here today. I'm going to start by telling you about your present, and the time that we're currently living in, as you may have noticed, is an intense time of unprecedented global social unrest. And that's why I created Riot. Riot is an emotionally responsive film that watches you back using artificial intelligence and facial recognition. You step into a live installation, and the AI monitors your emotion, and it will branch in real time. I'm now going to show you an extract from the branching narrative. As you watch the film, one participant, you will only have one branching narrative, depending if you're calm, anger, or fearful. I'm going to show you all narratives for you to get a sense of the experience.
Wake up! Wake up! No civilians are supposed to be here. Leave immediately! I said, leave immediately! Leave immediately!
And just seeing that cop screaming and thinking that it could be my child, my black child, who one day may incite fear just because of the color of his skin, just got me so angry, and I guess it just registered.
It was scary to be shouted at, and which then led me to, well, be detained by the police officer, actually. The fact that that's how it is in a real situation. You react scared and it escalates, and then you become pushed into a position where then suddenly you're criminalized or something.
Leave. That way now.
So for some reason there's a bit of a delay, but I think you can get the sense.
In any situation, I normally stay calm. So even though there were distractions and things, but for me, my instinct is to go calmer and breathe and calm myself down.
I worked with Brunel University London to create the artificial intelligence and data sets that we created completely bespoke. I call this form of storytelling subconscious storytelling, which makes you conscious of your subconscious emotions and also brings to the foreground the discussion on AI. What I'm going to talk to you about now is bias in technology. I made Riot in 2016, and then I went on after there to do residencies in New York at TED and ThoughtWorks, which is a technology company. And while there, I was doing a lot of investigation and research as an artist into technology, and that's when we started to discuss bias. So I'm just going to give you a couple of definitions here now, which are relevant. So you may be aware of artificial intelligence. I've created another one here, as I don't think it's always about the intelligence. It depends on really what is being programmed into the data sets. Also, I want you to be aware of the term machine learning. Machine learning is where the computer, after a while, starts to teach itself. So whatever starts off being taught and put into it, it will continue to develop that on its own. So within this context, bias has become an issue. So I wanted to give you an example of bias as opposed to explain what it is, because it will be easier. So this lady on the right, Felicity Huffman, was guilty of a federal offense, which was bribery, corruption, tax evasion. She could potentially have got 25 years in prison. She was sentenced to 30 and did 14. The lady on the left, Tanya McDowell, her niece lives in an area where there's not many good schools. So she changed the address on the application form for a family member to go to a better school in that area. For that offense, she got 5 years, and she's serving 5 years. That's an example of bias. So you may ask, in terms of bias, that bias is something which the industry is very aware of. Thought leaders at Google several years ago has identified this is the big implication. This is the big danger we need to be aware of. But you may be asking, what does bias look like in networks? Well, let me show you.
All right, so watch this. Black hand, nothing. Larry, go. Black hand, nothing. Larry, go. Racist mother sinks.
That's what bias looks like in networks, where probably the person who created that was not of the color of, is probably white or male traditionally, and the person using the sync, they have a different skin tone. So they didn't probably test the sensors that it would actually work on anything other than their own skin color. That is an example of bias. Yeah, you could say that's mildly, that is humorous. This is something which is far from humorous. This is a biased network that's affecting people's lives that exists today. This is as part of my research at ThoughtWorks, we came across a system called the Compass system. This is an AI which supports judges to determine the length of a criminal when they have been deemed guilty of an offense. This Compass system has no transparency. It's a private system, and it has something which has been proven to be biased against people of color and black people, which basically means they get longer sentences. Bias is very equal opportunities, ladies. Don't worry, we're not left out. This is an Amazon system, which was supporting recruiters recruiting at Amazon. They had this AI, and after 2 years, you know, they realized maybe something's wrong because it's not hiring any women. What had happened is that they're training the data set on a man's CV. Traditionally, men tend to use more action-orientated words like charged and led, while traditionally speaking, women tend to use terminology like team and collaborated. So the data set they used for the perfect candidate was a man, and women's CVs just didn't cut it, so they didn't hire any women for 2 years. As part of my research at ThoughtWorks, we did extensive investigation into this biased networks, and we came to the conclusion it's practically impossible not to have a biased network because of the bias within the developers. So we went the other way. We would like to democratize AI if we can't stop bias. So with my Riot film, I made an interactive film, and then we made an AI. I took off the film, and ThoughtWorks and myself, we made the AI accessible to everybody, open source, because we want to give this technology to the people. There's a couple of things you may have heard of called the internet and email. That was with the military and governments for decades before it came to us, the people. This cannot happen with AI. I'm just asking you to be judicious in terms of who you share this link with. This link is called EmoPi of the software, the AI we created. It's actually a beta version that we use in the future for the resistance. We use it to identify undercover law enforcement in the future. Just giving you a little bit more context in terms of AI. You may be aware of the Chinese social credit system, which is currently being prototyped, where people's digital identity and online identity has an impact on their real life. So if they say something detrimental against the government, then things like their travel or their job prospects are affected, which has happened to 23 million people who just can't travel as freely as they did. But you may be thinking, that's China. What's that got to do with us in England? Well, let me show you.
The front line in facial recognition. Police cameras in an East London street, everyone gets scanned. If you refuse, here's what can happen.
Don't cover my face, I cover my face. Don't push me over when I'm walking down the street.
This man didn't want to be caught by the police cameras, so he covered his face. Police stopped him, they photographed him anyway. An argument followed.
How would you like if you walk down the street and someone flashed you? Hold yourself down, you're going over. That's you.
These systems, these regulations are being created on the fly as these things are happening because there's no precedent to them. There's an organization I'm working with, Stop LAPD in LA, who are seeing this as the beginning of predictive policing. And they're they want these AI algorithms to be transparent so we can see what it is they're doing. They're actually subpoenaing them, their AI algorithms, to see what bias there is in there. This leads me to my current work, installation Perception.io, that is currently just finished and is being exhibited in New York at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian at the moment. I'm also working with NYU, behavioral psychologists there, and they have a special social perception, action, and motivation lab, because I'm looking at how AI can enable people greater self-awareness within the user experience. So I'm looking at how bias is currently in networks for law enforcement and how they may affect us in the future. That's why I created Perception I/O, or Perception Input-Output. So as you go into the space, you can become aware of how networks are created, and that you can become aware of how you as a person, how your bias can be integrated into the system. So you are actually going to be a cop, and you will experience the film as if it's a body cam on you, and you will come into contact with a white participant and a black participant. There'll be a white guilty and someone who is a criminal and someone that has mental health, and with the black, there'll also be someone that has mental health and someone that is a criminal. And your emotional response and your eye tracking will determine what happens in the narrative. So maybe you will respond differently to the white person, to the black person. Depending on your emotional response, the narrative will continue to branch. I'm not saying that you are 100% biased or prejudiced. With these experiences, it's very subjective, so I invite people to reflect upon the responses they have within themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this small intro and a little snippet from Perception I/O. When you see it crackling, that's when the narrative will branch as you watch it. I just want to say, it's got some strong language, but we're dealing with some very strong issues.
Bienvenido, ciudadano. Baruch haba.
Welcome, valued citizen, to the future of law enforcement. Perception I/O. Your future needs you today.
Yo, press the button.
Requesting additional support. We have a 1031. Shots fired. I repeat, shots fired. Dispatch is requesting nearest officer to 39th and 3rd Ave. Suspect is armed and dangerous.
Sir, there's been a robbery in the neighborhood and you fit the description. I need your hands up.
What the fuck do you want,
sir,
man?
Sir,
what the fuck do you want?
Calm down. Sir, do you have a piece of ID with you? Sir, I need to see your ID.
What the fuck do you want,
man? Back up! Back up!
What do you want? What do you want?
Sir, back up! Ma'am, stay out of it! Back up and calm down, sir. Okay? Sir, what are you doing here?
You white motherfuckers always fucking with us.
Back up and calm down.
So that takes us to your future. 2020, next year, is where the Chinese social credit system is going to be released. Currently, it's just being prototyped. And when it's released, it's going to change the world. You may not be aware that these networks are not just being installed in China. They're being exported to the Caribbean, to Africa, to New York, and to Europe. At the moment, they're just networks that China has created for a transport system. What will happen in the future is that these networks are actually going to become activated. And we're going to move into a world of weaponized technology, auto self-surveillance, and biased networks in an unprecedented way. These systems are not created by working class people or people of color or largely by women. They're not really designed to benefit us. They have a particular objective. The stories of my childhood have created the world and influenced the world in which we live in now. That's why it's called programming. And the immersive documentaries of the future, which I'm building now, is making people aware of the world that we're going to be moving into. You see, the message that you've asked me to come back here today is to remind you to be diligent and judicious and conscious and deliberate in the stories that you tell yourselves and each other, whether you're a developer, whether you're a coder, whether you're an academic, or whether you're a storyteller. The stories that you tell yourselves and each other are going to be creating the world of tomorrow. And I need you to remember and know that your future needs you today. Thank you.